Welcome to Multifamily Insights. I'm your host, John Casmon, and I want to thank you for joining us for another great episode. Listen, if you are enjoying this show and getting some great value for your investing goals, let us hear about it. Leave us some honest feedback with a rating and review on any platform where you listen to the show. It helps us, but it also helps other listeners find this show so they can get that same value for their investing goals. And if you haven't done so, or this is your first time listening to the show, make sure you hit that follow or subscribe button so you don't miss an episode. Look, we got an excellent show today. We're going to be talking to John Makarewicz. John Makarewicz is the president, CEO, and co-founder of Mark Spain Real Estate, the largest real estate team by transaction volume by Real Trends. He is also the president and co-founder of Faris Capital Partners. Now, they acquire value-add investments in the southeastern part of the United States. They formed in April 2024, and they've acquired 4 buildings as lead general partners and 2 as co-general partners. Let's welcome to the show, John Makarewicz.
Hey, John. So happy to be here today.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's been quite a journey for me, spending so much time in real estate. And just for some clarity, I actually am no longer at Mark Spain Real Estate, but still have equity in that business. Big believer and just big fan of what they're doing. But I left about 2 years ago, so I now focus full time on multifamily investing, and I just am absolutely loving it. For me, John, and I think, we talked about a month or so ago, but, these challenging markets actually create so much opportunity. And I think for a newer fund like us, it allows us to, candidly learn from some of the mistakes maybe other operators made when the market was a bit overheated, right, in 2020, 2021. I say a bit, that's probably the understatement of the year. But yeah, we've had a lot of fun and a lot of success so far, and looking forward to many more years of that success in the future.
John, I love it. We're definitely going to talk more about kind of you coming into the space and some of the things that you're doing in your business now with Faris Capital Partners. Before we do that, you started to give a little bit more background. Let's stay there, right? I went over your bio at a high level. Take 2 minutes and fill in some of those gaps.
Yeah. So, I got into residential real estate right out of college. In fact, I never actually finished school. I was one of those kids that could just coast through high school with A's and B's. And then I got to college and learned that studying skills were necessary. And, I did good in a lot of classes, but I just found if I'm not interested in it, I just had a hard time engaging. And, as they say, education can sometimes be wasted on youth. Now I'm I read 50, 60 books a year, right? And I, almost wish I could go back. But all that to say, I came home after spending a few years at Florida State and, was just trying to figure out okay, what's my plan here? I was a little, upset with myself for not having found that success. And so I was taking some college courses here in Atlanta, but got into real estate. And I just fell in love. That ability to serve people, to help people navigate a very complex and emotional situation. And I looked around and realized, especially in residential real estate, there's just, the real estate agents, as you know, John, especially on the residential side, do not have a great reputation, largely speaking, right? There's many wonderful agents out there, but just that ability to come with a very, direct focus on client experience. And all of a sudden I found early success. And so cut that short a little bit. I ended up linking up with a gentleman named Mark Spain, and he was a team leader in Metro Atlanta. And at the time there was 9 of us. This was around 2008. So the Great Recession was in full swing. And we were looking around trying to figure out what are we going to do to navigate this situation. And after a few false starts with maybe some real estate owned foreclosure business, we decided to lean heavily into short sales. And that was actually the time that I had the most fun. And it's weird to say because so many people were going through so much pain, but that short sale process we developed helped them navigate through that and come to a successful outcome where they avoided foreclosure. And we ended up becoming the largest short sale team in the United States. And that brought us opportunities we could have never foreseen, largest being the single family rental institutional investors that started entering the market, say in 2010, 2011. So we picked up an account with Invitation Homes. A lot of you may be familiar with Blackstone, of course. Invitation Homes was their shingle where they went out and bought approximately about 85,000 homes across the United States in about 3 to 4 years. And we were their broker in Atlanta. And so through that, we knew enough to know this would end at some point. So as a company, we decided to preserve all that revenue and profit and reinvest it back in the business. So we ended up launching a program called a guaranteed offer, which was really when our growth just, took that hockey stick, upwards growth. And what that looked like is radio, television, advertising, where we would let folks know, come to us and we can bring you a cash offer. And so we leveraged those single family rental institutional investors to be that provider. And so we would go out on an appointment. Here's your offer and here's your market strategy. And so that led to some impressive growth in Atlanta, which then gave us the inspiration to grow the business beyond Atlanta into multiple markets across the Southeast. And that led to a successful exit, private equity exit in 2021. So, it was amazing looking back. It was about a 15-year process to go from 9 agents to 650 agents with multiple markets. And so, for me, John, and I don't know about you as you look back on your career, but it's the challenging times that you remember the most, right? And so thinking back about the Great Recession and some sleepless nights, but I'm the type, and just as how I'm wired, when I'm met with a challenge, just like everybody else, I get frustrated for about a minute, but I quickly turn to action. And it's like, what are we going to do about it, right? And so that methodology just led to, once again, some of those steps we took that led to the success. But candidly, after that many years in residential, I was looking for a new challenge and decided to leave Mark Spain Real Estate. And my current business partner, Mark Faris, and I had just developed a friendship over the years. He had a very similar business in residential real estate, but he was exploring getting into this multifamily syndication business. And so when I shared with him I had left Mark Spain Real Estate, about a week later, I got a text message, got an idea, let's talk. And here we are today. It's funny. When I left Mark Spain Real Estate, I actually intended to take most of that year off just to kind of reset and recharge. But Mark presented this opportunity. So within about a month and a half, I was back in the workforce, and we've been building Faris Capital Partners ever since. So really, for me, I like new challenges. I like building. I like growing. And so this job gives me that perfect opportunity. And so for Mark Faris and I, we're bringing that same client-focused experience. So I think one of the things that, in a sense, differentiates us is we think a lot about the resident experience. So that's really who we're thinking about. The investors and the shareholders are absolutely critically important, but our view is if we do a really great job at the resident level, then they're going to be excited to renew, and candidly accept maybe a rate increase, but they know that they're going to get value, whether through new amenities, better service at the leasing centers from the property managers. And so we've implemented some guarantees to make it easier for the residents should they have a life change, or, one of the main things we focus on is just speedy service. So every maintenance request is completed at minimum within 24 hours outside if a part needs to be ordered. So just some of those things we've layered in has helped us go from, our first investment in Largo, for example, we were performing out like a 1,850 post-renovated rent on a 2-bedroom, 2-bath. We're achieving 2,000 plus today, largely because of that experience we're able to provide. So, bringing that acumen and that kind of approach from residential and applying it to the residents. Yep. For me, I think about it, it's the Costco philosophy. We hire a really great team, take great care of them. They in turn take care of the residents, who in turn take care of those shareholders, in our world, the investors. So that's a little
John,
bit of our approach.
Let me jump in, man. You said some great things there, and I want to get to some of your background. We'll definitely spend more time talking about Faris. But your background's really intriguing to me because you talked about, one, getting into real estate early on while you were still in college. You recognized that, hey, you kind of learned naturally. You were able to kind of coast through school, and then you got to college and realized, oh, okay, maybe I need to try this a little bit differently. But you got into the real estate world as a real estate agent. You ended up joining a team where you had 9 agents, and you were able to grow and scale that to 650 agents working with Blackstone's arm in single family real estate. And you locked in on short sales. And that experience gave you a lot of exposure, gave you a lot of ability to be creative and understanding challenging deals that had some hair in them, deals where you had to figure out a solution. And that really allowed you to kind of grow and scale and get to this guaranteed offer. Ultimately, you exit that business, you link up with your new partner, Mark Faris, and here today you've got Faris Capital Partners. One of the things that stood out to me was, and I want to get your take on this. I'm not sure if someone said this to you before, but you've got 2 of those businesses, right? Mark Spain and Faris Capital Partners, where you were very integral in helping to grow and drive success. As I'm listening to you talk, it sounds like these individuals recognized your abilities right away and said, I need to get John on the team. Hey, John, here's this thing I'm looking to do. I want to get you on a team. Can you talk about kind of your role? And I wrote down in my little notes here, like, the visionary, the execution person. Like, talk to me about kind of your role as you see it, both back at Mark Spain, but also here today with Faris Capital.
Yeah, so I'm an execution operator at my core. That's what I've learned about myself. I'm big into systems. It's interesting. I was actually getting my hair cut, and the woman who cuts my hair is my wife's best friend. And she said, "Yeah, Megan says you're about the most rigid guy she's ever met." And at first, I was kind of like almost offended. I'm like, I'm not rigid, but then I actually thought about it. I was like, yeah, actually, I kind of am. I follow the same routine. Like you could set a clock to it. I wake up at the same time. I read for 30, 45 minutes. I do some breathing exercises. I go to the gym, right, and then I'm at the desk at the same time. And so what I've learned about myself, and some of it's studying guys like Steve Jobs and these highly successful entrepreneurs, that it's decision fatigue, right? So if you can just minimize the amount of decisions you have to make in a day, you're more free and clear to address those more complicated decisions that do come up on a daily life and business. From an operations standpoint, that execution standpoint, that's really where I fit in. So in both of my business partnerships, I was partnered with the visionary, right? So Mark Spain was the guy who would come in and he was up all night thinking about a new idea. And he would say, John, right now our leads are all going to the agents and our conversions are all over the place. What if we were to build an inside sales team? And that would be the idea. And then it was my job to go figure that out, right? So who are we going to hire to lead this thing? What is it going to look like? What technology and tools are we going to need? So I think for me, I can manage a lot of complexity and get it narrowed down into just actionable steps. It's just how my brain works. I think too, one of the reasons that I've had the success I've had is because I'm always open to new ideas and I'll never say no. And by that, going back to those short sales, I was actually in an agent role when we first started taking on those short sales at Mark Spain Real Estate. I was also managing the buyer team as a secondary role. That was sort of Mark's first challenge to me, help me grow the buyer business because we were pretty listing focused on the residential side. And so, when the short sale thing came along, all of our agents said, I don't want to do them. They're difficult. You have to negotiate with a bank. It's challenging. And guess what? I had a kid at home and one on the way. So I was like, I'll do it, and within about 6 to 9 months, we had developed a complete system around it. We had partnered with locals attorneys that did most of the heavy lifting. And of course, every agent started going, I want in, I want in. And so that, that's something I tell young people all the time. Like I have a 20-year-old, so I'm talking to their friend, his friends, and they're asking for career advice and how I found success. I'm like, dude, you got to add value before you ask for value, number one. So don't ask for that job promotion unless you're already doing more than what's required of you. And when your boss comes to you with a difficult challenge or task, that's the time you lean in. You don't lean, back kind of thing. So, early on, I'm a big reader. And so books like The E-Myth Revisited that just talked about the importance of those scalable systems. And Mark Spain was a big driver of that. So in other words, he was coming to me. And when we were like say a 9-person, 15-person, 30-person team, we had processes and systems for everything. And we were always thinking ahead like 2-3 years in the future, like not necessarily what we need today, but what we need 3 years from now. Yeah. And that's actually an approach that Mark Faris and I did at Faris Capital before we even launched. We literally wrote a 10-page document. We looked 3 years in the future and said, what do we want our company to look like from a cultural standpoint? We went department by department and we clearly articulated everything. So it's this idea that in 2027, we can pull this document back open and ideally the business looks exactly like we thought it would. And so that's another factor, having the vision to understand not necessarily what's important today and what has to happen today, but what also has to happen 3 years from now and going ahead and building those systems in. So I think that's where, people see the value that I bring. It's my ability to work through those processes and systems and find shortcuts and find opportunities to eliminate friction in the system or in the process. I'm also just like a dog on a bone, man. If I have a problem or a challenge, I don't rest until that problem or challenge is solved for, or we, maybe eliminate it altogether, right? Maybe we realize, we don't actually have to address this challenge because that's another factor, right? All businesses have fires and you have to determine which ones you're going to fight first and prioritize those things. So I think a lot of it just comes from, how my brain's wired. I'm a very curious individual. And so when I see a problem, I don't just see the problem. I see like the 7 or 8 things that led to that problem. In tech, they call it the 6 whys, right? Why did it happen? Why did it happen? Why did it happen? And so naturally, I think I just have that gift. I'm just very curious. And so, even for me, if I'm interviewing somebody from a competitor that maybe is interested in working for me, I'm asking a lot of questions because I'm trying to get some insights. Maybe there's
Yeah.
something we can pull from this. I know for me, touring rent comps, the thing I'm actually looking for is what are they doing better than us, and what
Yeah.
ideas can we maybe borrow or take over to our approach. So curiosity is one of those things I think that a lot of people have underdeveloped, and is something that I think all, especially if you're 20, 25, newer in your career, don't be afraid to ask those questions. Don't be afraid to dig deeper. In my experience, the best employees I ever hired kind of annoyed me in the first couple of months because they were asking so many questions. But,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, it's because they were curious. And that's what I'm looking for. That's what I think I bring, that
Yeah.
curiosity. And just that, man, if there's something out there, I can't rest until it's taken care of. It's just how my brain's wired, right? So I just
Yeah.
attack problems. I think that's another thing a lot of the folks I've partnered with and have worked with have seen from me.
John, the thing I love is that you've got a different personality than maybe many of the guests we've had. And what I mean is, many people are the visionaries, right? They play that
Yeah.
role where they've got this idea, I've got this vision of the future I want to create, and they go out there and they do that. And what gets lost in the sauce is who actually has the ability to take that random idea that comes at 2 a.m. and figure it out and figure
Yeah.
out how to implement it, figure out how to navigate the different loopholes and, hurdles that you have to overcome to make that idea come to fruition. And that's what you've been able to do. And for our listeners, whether you're like John, whether you're a visionary, whether you're an execution person, find that other person.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
one of the little details that, people don't always tell you, but the key to success here is being able to find that person that you can pair up with. Whether you like to focus on the big picture and big ideas, you need that person that can bring those ideas to life. If you are great at execution, align yourself with someone who has those big ideas, that vision, and help them bring those ideas to life. That's going to be a way for you to grow and scale your business. Let's talk a little bit more about that and what you're doing today, right, with Faris Capital
Yeah,
Partners.
that's right.
You started talking about kind of your approach, focusing more on the residents. And one thing I want to get into is that this is, you're coming into the space after kind of the big run up. So you're starting to see the remnants of, the last cycle, folks who maybe have overpaid for deals, folks who have loans that are expiring. Talk to me about kind of your entree into the market, what you're seeing, and is that an advantage for you, or do you see that as a disadvantage?
So we see it as an absolute advantage. And the reason for is because we can go back and we can look and see, candidly, what mistakes maybe some of those operators made during that overheated time in 21 and 22. Obviously, a lot of the problems that a lot of operators are experiencing is because they took short-term bridge debt or they took floating rate loans, right? And so at Faris Capital Partners, it goes back to, so the first day I officially started, Mark and I actually had visited an asset that he had raised some capital on, came in as co-general partner. So we actually met at that property. And so the next day we locked ourselves in a hotel conference room for the full day. And we, worked on that vivid vision. I mentioned that 3-year mission, vision, values. But what we also focused on, we actually spent the most time on this, is like, what are our rules? Like, what is our, like the things we will just not deviate from. And so we have 3 golden rules. One is that we will only buy assets with fixed rate financing. If we do a floating rate, they will absolutely be a rate cap. Like, today, John, there's actually an argument to be made to take on some floating rate debt with a rate cap because, if rates stay the same, you're still good with that rate cap, but rates come down, you might be in the money. But a lot of operators weren't buying those rate caps. They were just expecting, they thought the party would never end and these rates would stay low forever. And, my view is that if you actually look at the demographics and the big shift that's happening in the demographics around the world, there are just fewer people. And so what that means is that as the population ages, there's going to be fewer investment dollars coming into the marketplace. So my view is interest rates are kind of where they're going to be. You'll see some fluctuations in the treasuries and the rates, but I don't think we'll ever see 2 and 3% rates again, certainly not in the foreseeable future. So fixed rate financing is rule number 1. Golden rule number 2 is that we always have strong reserves. So every one of our deals, we have 6 months of principal and interest sitting in the bank for a rainy day. So even if we have 3 years of interest only, we look forward to that principal, and that's what we base that 6 months on. So we're not just going, oh, that 3 years, it's interest only. No, it's principal and interest. We net up our contingency, our CapEx budget by 10% to have a nice contingency. Certainly today, the new administration is, there's some conversations around tariffs. I think we're going to see some labor market pressures if he truly continues down the path with mass deportation. And so knowing that, we expect some price fluctuation. So even when we're underwriting our CapEx, we're always doing it very conservatively, but we add that additional 10%. And the third is we only buy deals that are cash flowing today. So what that means is value add. So strong value add deals. We're typically looking for a deal that on average across a 5-year hold will come out to at least 6% cash flow. And those are our 3 golden rules. So, it makes it easy to kind of go in and just quickly, back of the envelope, look at a deal and see, is this one worth pursuing? So we're not chasing opportunistic. We're not chasing core plus. With deal flow being challenged, I would be lying if I said we didn't occasionally start going, well, maybe we do core plus or something, or maybe we do this opportunistic deal. But we always catch ourselves and go, no, we have this philosophy. We have these rules for a reason. And so we're going to honor those rules. So those are the 3 things that we identified as maybe misses that some other operators did in the past that if we held strong on would help us avoid those circumstances. Now, another factor is right now, I wouldn't say deals are necessarily on sale. Obviously, a lot of operators are upside down. So you're seeing some ridiculous cap rates. You're seeing overpriced deals. But, it's that idea that, in my view, because we're seeing such a slowdown in new development, due to these higher interest rates and materials costs, that, if we buy in an area that has strong economic drivers, strong demand drivers, we don't bake this into our underwriting, but we anticipate probably a little bit of tailwinds that we'll experience in year 3, year 4, and year 5 of ownership on the deals we're buying today, just given the fact that I think we're going to continue to see huge supply challenges into the future. John, I don't know if you saw this, but from 2019 to 2023, the average home builder's material expenses increased 40.5%. And with the new tariffs, I just read an analysis a recent home builder put out that said they expect the cost of a new home to go up by at least $29,000 in addition to that 40% lift I already mentioned. So single family homes are going to be just more and more expensive, which is going to push more renters. And so we're just a big believer in apartment multifamily, particularly in that value add space. And our idea is that we like the value add because we can basically go in and do an exceptional renovation. Another thing we have is an in-house construction manager. So he tours all the deals with us. Like, Monday we're touring 4 deals. He's coming in town. So we can really refine our budget, make sure we have the right numbers. And, he identifies things we miss. And we go in and we do really class A interior renovations. We attack the exterior in the first 30 days just to add that value immediately to the residents. And so that idea that we can deliver a unit that feels like class A, it might be an 80s or 90s building, but the class A that just got developed down the street is charging $400 more a month in rent. So that's kind of our thesis and what we've kind of taken from maybe the mistakes others have made in the past.
Yeah, John, I love what you shared there. A couple of big thoughts jump out to me. One, in recognizing the issues or the mistakes that other operators have made, and obviously hindsight's 2020, so it's great to be able to look back, but you're starting with a clean slate. And one of those obviously is folks bought deals or maybe they overpaid for them based on the current financial environment or the financial environment at the time. Interest rates shot up. Maybe they didn't have rate caps. So you all came in and you're able to put some rules in place. One of those rules you mentioned was buying fixed rate. And if you do consider using bridge loans, you would use rate caps, which makes a lot of sense. The second thing that you mentioned was having proper reserves, 6 months of principal and interest payments sitting aside in a reserve account, making sure that you raise more for CapEx, 10% above where you actually think your capital expenses are going to be. You're going to make sure you raise more than that. You shared a little bit about kind of the cost of new development, and that really plays a couple of different roles. One is it's just going to be more expensive to develop new assets, which means those rents for those assets is going to be higher in order for those developers to break even. And for you focusing on value add investment opportunities, you're buying something where there's already cash flow in place. You're going to go in with the business plan to renovate those units and add more value. And we love it. And that's the same way we like to operate too. Like we want to buy existing properties. They're making money. I can go look at the last 3 years of operations. I can take a look at the market dynamics and figure out where we're going to squeeze out more value. A couple of things you started to get into, which I think are really interesting. You talked a lot about kind of the organizational structure the strategic conversations you have, the rules, sitting down and mapping out the vision. I think that's so important because oftentimes we get so caught up on just analyzing deals, and investors don't spend as much time thinking through what is the business, what's our vision, what's our mission, what's our philosophy, what's our buy box. I know a lot of people just start analyzing deals. They'll analyze a deal in Montgomery, Alabama, one in Charlotte, North Carolina, one in Orlando, Florida. And I'm like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
You haven't even picked the market. You don't have your investing strategy. You're looking at Class A stuff, Class C stuff. Like, you've got to figure out what you do. And I think that's a huge insight. When you're talking, you're getting at the point of you want to understand where you can really thrive. So
Yeah.
understanding those value add deals, you're talking about your in-house construction team, bringing those folks to walk these properties with you so you have a very clear business plan.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit more about that, because as you were, talking about how the residents are important, you talked a little bit about resident retention and just that philosophy. Give me a little bit more about how this actually shows up in the business plan and the execution when it comes to the resident experience.
Yeah, it's all about culture, right? So the culture, and culture is sort of a buzzword, right? And I think there's, like, you sometimes see the mega corporations, they think just throwing some posters on the wall or something with their mission, vision, and values is all you need to do. It's something you have to nurture every day, and then you have to bring in the team that actually shares those same values. So one of the key lessons I learned at Mark Spain Real Estate, it was actually interesting. So we were initially affiliated with Keller Williams before we became our own brokerage, and Gary Keller would tell this story about, his company wasn't expanding. He had opened up a few new offices in Texas. He had kind of taken that first leap out of Austin where they founded, and it didn't work. It just blew up and it just didn't go well. And so he hired this business consultant who said, basically, after spending some time with him, you're the problem. You're not the person to grow this business. You're a demanding perfectionist. You're excellent, kind of as the CEO leader of this business, but you need to bring somebody in that just loves people and can go out and kind of create that culture. And so, to cut a long story short, years and years later, we ended up hiring that same business consultant. And so what they taught us was really, when you're hiring, go real slow. So we have like a 4 or 5 step interview process, screening interview, comprehensive interview. We do a behavioral assessment. We check references, obviously, and then we do a final commitment interview. And so you spend so much time with the person, a couple of things happen. You usually get the best version of them on that first call. And then the second one, they start to reveal themselves a little bit more. And then as you get further into the process, they're just comfortable. And so we've pulled the ripcord, so to speak, on a hire on that 4th interview, because all of a sudden they kind of revealed something about themselves that we're like, are they the right fit? So no one's perfect at it. You're not going to get it right 100% of the time. But when you build an exceptional team, so like we went out and hired an asset manager with 20 plus years experience. Our acquisition director has 15 plus years experience. So we brought in a team that had acumen that Mark and I didn't have, that understood things that we didn't have. And, you mentioned that kind of that entrepreneur, the visionary, and, that's that book E-Myth is all about, right? They're the visionaries. But what I've often sometimes found too is egos come into play, and there is that fear of bringing somebody in that is smarter than you. And so that's something I got very comfortable with early in my career. And so you bring in the right people, and then we talk about it every day. So for example, everybody has values, but we take it a step further. We have what we call the fundamentals, which are actually 35 behaviors that define those values. So a value to say genuine love of people, that's one of our values. But what does that really mean? It means we pick up the phone when we have, some potential bad news or something to share. We don't send an email or text message. It means we never overpromise and overpromise and underdeliver. And so these things are very defined. So literally every morning we have a morning huddle at 8:30 where every team member reports on some good news, their metrics, and their number one priority for the day. But we start it with one of those fundamentals. We just rotate through them. So we actually then take that down to the property management level. So today we're working with third-party property managers, John, but we actually hire the team and then bring them to the property management company, and then they run their process. So we're very in the weeds when it comes to the property managers we're bringing on, because they also have to share those same values that we have. So we train them alongside the property management company. And so great example, that Largo asset I mentioned before, Hurricanes. We had 2 that came through. Now, thankfully, we didn't have any issues at our property, but some folks did lose their jobs. So we gave out some, DoorDash gift cards. We worked out payment plans for those that maybe had a temporary loss of income. We do backpacks at the start of the school year and do some backpack giveaways for some of the kids just stuffed with school supplies. So just these little things that cost a little bit of money, but just build, that community feel and that community trust. So boiled it down into one word, it's culture, right? And so the problem with culture is that often people talk about it at the top, but they're not living the culture. One of our fundamentals is to show up on time, and so if all of a sudden I was 30 minutes or 20 minutes late to meeting, then I've just given permission to everybody else on the team to do the same. So Mark and I have to live these fundamentals like 100% of the time, and then that sets the example. The bottom line is culture will never work if you have the wrong people on the team. So I would say I spend most of my time on building the right team in the early days. And then, when we have a new hire or a new opportunity that we want to take advantage of and we know we need to bring somebody in, I've heard it said, and it's a philosophy I have, if you have a problem in your business, you're missing a person. And so go find that person. So that would be the number one piece of advice I have for anybody, whatever business you're in, is spend a lot of time hiring. It's a frustrating, it can be a stressful, even candidly annoying process. You got to go through 25 candidates to narrow it down to 3 to get to one. But by spending that time, it's kind of like what's hard today just becomes harder tomorrow, right? So if you get it right today, then everything becomes easier. So those are some of the things we focus. It's all about the team, all about the culture. And then when you have the right people in the seat, you don't even have to think about it or worry about it. Like nobody had to tell Corey, our property manager in Largo, to check on every single resident after the hurricane came through and work on payment plans. Now, she knew enough to come to us to have talk around the strategy, but she just knew to do it because she just cares. And so that's the key, man. It's like not everybody cares. I look for multipliers. There was a great book by Liz Wiseman called Multipliers. And so in other words, the hire should multiply your results, not just add to it. And by the way, some people subtract, right? That toxic person. So that's harsh to say, but I'll say it: slow to hire, fast to fire. And that's a philosophy that's, been successful for me along my career.
John, I think this is so helpful. You talked about just building culture, and something else you got into was really understanding how to build a winning team, right?
Yeah.
So we talk about culture. There's a buzzword. My wife and I were talking about culture this morning. So it's certainly a buzzword, but beyond that, when you take it to heart and you understand the environment you want to create, the norms that you want your employees, your residents, anybody who is involved in your organization, what you want them to experience, that's culture, right? Certainly it's how you prioritize things. It's how you make decisions when things cost money. That's all a part of culture, and it's really important to understand that. The other thing you talked about, which I think is really important too, you all, you kind of started Faris Capital Partners with your partner very recently, right? Last year, essentially.
Yeah,
but
April 23 was our official start. That's right.
April 2024, that's my anniversary, April 23rd. But here's the thing I want to make sure people don't miss. While you all were new to the syndication space, you went out and you got an experienced team. You got an asset manager with 20 years experience. You got an acquisition manager with 15 years experience. It wasn't just you and Mark saying, all right, hey, we got this business. Let's go ahead and see if we can figure this out. And it's the blind leading the blind. You went out and you tapped into folks. I know you also, worked with mentors and coaches as well. So I think it's really important for people to understand you may come into something new, but you want to be the most, inexperienced person on the team if you're starting a new venture. Surround yourself with those experts. Get that person who's got 15, 10 plus years experience doing exactly what it is you're asking them to do. You need an acquisitions manager. You need an asset manager. Don't trust and rely on your own experience, particularly if you have no experience, to be the guy running the show. And so often we see that where there's someone who's new to the space and they're trying to do it all. Humble yourself, build a winning team. That's going to allow you to multiply the business. That's John, I definitely want to, we could keep going for a while, but I know I'm looking at time as well. A couple of things. So one, for folks who want to learn more about you and your team, they can go to fariscapitalpartners.com, check out the team and check out more about the properties and projects they're working on there. Right now, we're going to transition to a round of insights.
They say you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So if you want to grow as a multifamily investor, you have to spend more time with other multifamily investors. And an easy way to do that is to join our apartment investing mastermind group today. Just go to casmoncapital.com and click on the mastermind button. Now, as a part of this group, you'll get access to expert trainings, group coaching calls, industry news and updates, as well as all of our webinars and workshops, including our 3-hour workshop on raising capital. Again, if you want to be around other multifamily investors that can help you scale your portfolio today and grow your network, make sure you're a part of the Apartment Investing Mastermind. Just go to casmoncapital.com and click on the Mastermind button today.
John, give me a failure or an apparent failure that set you up for later success.
So a failure. So when we took on that business with Invitation Homes, I was, at that time, my title was Director of Operations, and we had an incredible team. And the gentleman who was running our investor department, we called it, was 20 plus years experience as a home builder and also flipped a lot of homes personally. So he knew his stuff. And he is just a badass. Still in touch with him today. But all that to say is he was the type that just never asked for help. And so I would kind of stop by and say, hey, do you need anything? No, I've got it. And, bottom line is they were getting behind and I wasn't pushing enough to just basically insist, look, you need help. And my partner actually called me into the office and actually fired me. He said, man, you dropped the ball here. Barry's got, he's 200, properties behind in terms of analysis and you haven't really taken action. I just don't think this is the right role for you. And I sat in that office for about an hour and pleaded my case and said, look, I hear you, give me this opportunity. And I did not point fingers. I didn't say, well, gosh, he didn't ask for help. I just said, look, I'm going to own this. You're right. And I humbled myself and I said, look, just give me a chance. Give me 2 weeks to get this thing back on track and you won't be, disappointed. And so, I called my wife and I said, look, I'm not coming home for a number of hours. And we sat there that night and mostly got caught up. I came in 6 a.m. the next morning. We got even further caught up. And then by doing that, it actually strengthened the relationship with Barry where there was more trust and he knew I was willing to actually get in the weeds and do the work of an analyst. He had a team of these guys, but I was doing that work alongside them. And that relationship strengthened. And bottom line is we got it back on track. And it taught me a lesson. It just goes back to as the leader, it is 100% your responsibility. And I think about FDR. I don't know if you know this story, but on D-Day, the night before D-Day, he actually sat down and wrote his speech as if D-Day failed. And he took 100% ownership of it. And so he also had the speech if it went well, but he also wrote one. So he was prepared to take that ownership, that extreme ownership. This was my decision. It failed and it's on me. And so that extreme ownership is what I learned in that position. It doesn't matter if it's his department and his responsibility. As the leader, I have that ownership. And like Jocko Willink talks about, right? It's that idea that if the mission fails, maybe your leaders didn't give you enough, of a plan and enough communication down here, but these guys also have a responsibility because they didn't ask enough questions and get that clarity. So that was probably the biggest moment in my career that really shaped who I am today and just extreme ownership. And then it was funny because about 6-7 years later, Mark would sometimes come to me and go dude, stop taking everybody's, stop taking the blame for everything. That guy screwed that up. That wasn't you. I was like, yes, but he works for me. And so that kind of philosophy of extreme ownership is what I took from that experience.
I love it. Give me a digital or mobile resource you recommend for our listeners.
So it is going to be a little bit different, but delete social media from your phones. Now, look, I get you might have business like LinkedIn, right? So if you have it on there, put some time limits on it. But I think social media, and I'll say the other thing is 24-hour news are the biggest negative influences in our culture today. It's driving us further apart. Social media is all about negativity. It's how it drives engagement. And it just is something I don't allow into my brain. I just don't do it. I do mess around a little bit on Instagram, because I have pictures of my kids and things like that, but it's just off the phone. And so in terms of a resource, I would say, for me, Audible is the number one. I have 3 books a month on Audible. I don't get through 3 through Audible because what I'll do is I love to read. So I actually read every morning with a hard copy of a book. But if I go for a walk or if I'm in my car, I'm listening to a business book, a leadership book, a mindset book. I love biographies about leaders. Occasional podcasts, obviously. How I Built This is one I love. But Audible, I think, we have the world's knowledge in our pockets, right? And a lot of folks just aren't taking advantage of that. So I'd say that's the resource. And then the thing to take away would be social media.
Love it. Speaking of books, give me the book you've recommended or gifted the most in the last year.
Yeah. So there's actually, it's the same author. So it was The Accidental Superpower, which he wrote in 2014, Peter Zeihan. Today, it's The End of the World is Just the Beginning. It is so fascinating, and it explains so much about what's going on in today's world. And I'm not sitting here trying to get into politics, but some of the things we're seeing with the Trump administration are a reflection of what this guy's talking about. I mentioned it earlier. It's demographics in the world are changing. The baby boomers were such a big generation, and we've experienced this incredible run of success, largely due to just how large that population was. They were in the workforce, they're putting capital into the marketplaces. And so we're going to see a lot of disorder around the world. China has some major issues. Did you know that China's population will cut in half from 2020 to 2050 just because they're only having 1.5 or 1.2 children per married family? And so think about what that'll do to supply chains. Think about what that will do to available capital. But the book it's not all doom and gloom. It talks about how the United States is just the perfect country, not because of its politics, but just literally the geography. We have everything we need to be self-sustained. We have good relationships. Of course, Trump's bumping up a little bit with, Canada and Mexico. But basically, if the whole rest of the world went to hell, the United States will still be able to perform well. But it's giving me a lot of thought and thesis around why I love real estate, because I think you're going to see a lot of turmoil in the public markets in the coming decades, really, and even in the next 10 years, due to that lack of available capital. And so I think about that and I go, okay, right land, they're not making more of it. You can't move it. So invest in real estate. So I've been fortunate in my career. I've had an exit. I have a lot of money in the public markets, to be clear, but going forward, 100% of my investment dollars are going into real estate.
Give me a daily habit that helps you stay focused on your goals.
So for me, it's waking up early. Now, I'm not like the 4 a.m., 5 a.m. I usually get up around 5:30, but I read first thing in the morning and I do some breathing exercises. I would say the gym, by the way, is actually probably the number one. I go 4 days a week. I hit the Peloton 2 days a week, and I go for 4-mile walks most days at lunch. I have a greenway right near my house. So in about an hour, I can hit 4 miles, throw a chicken breast in the air fryer and get back to work. And it just helps to clear off a lot of that. We all have it, our brains, right? It's just product of the world and how it's changed so rapidly. We went from jobs that required physical exertion to all sitting in office desks within about 150 years. And I don't think our brains have caught up, right? So you're seeing more anxiety, more stress, depression. And so getting out and moving my body helps to burn off some of that, maybe say more negative energy, and allows me to be more focused and clear-headed in my day-to-day work. So those things. And then, it's like that, I don't know if you ever saw that talk. It was a Navy commander he gave at UT. It was their commencement speech. And, the title of the talk is Make Your Bed. And you could look it up. It's amazing. But just starting the day by accomplishing some tasks. And so for me, it's like that reading, that breathing exercises, the gym. I feel like I've accomplished a lot, and it's only 8 a.m. and now the rest of the day I can attack. So I think for me, those are some of the things, but really that physical exercise is critically important. And health is, a key factor there as well. If you feel crappy, you're going to make crappy decisions, right? Just bottom line. So eating good, but I'd say the gym is the number one thing for me.
Give me your number one insight for launching a syndication business today.
Build the team. Now, look, I understand some of you may be coming into this and you don't have capital, right? So Mark and I had other successful businesses. And so we were able to capitalize this business in a way that allowed us to do that. But if it's just you and maybe a partner and you don't have that depth of experience, at minimum, go find yourself a strong asset manager that you can bring on. And candidly, I know of a group and their asset manager, came from the manufacturing world, right? Thinking about bottlenecks in the manufacturing process. And so, person's talented, but it's go find somebody with that experience so that they can help you see the things that your new eyes maybe just aren't looking for. So building a key team is critical.
John, I love it. We're going to lighten the mood on this last question. You're out there in the Atlanta market. Give me your favorite place to grab a bite to eat.
So I'm up in Alpharetta. So Foundation in downtown Alpharetta is my wife and I's go-to. They used to have another location in Roswell, and that was our go-to. Just really great food, great drinks, great ambience. But I'm fortunate. I barely leave a 5-mile radius of my home unless I'm looking at deals. So that'd be my go-to spot. I would say NFA Burger in Sandy Springs is the lunch spot. It's literally in a Chevron gas station, but just the absolute best smash burgers I've ever had. So that's kind of the Friday. If I want to catch up with some friends, we'll head down there and grab a quick burger. But yeah, Foundation is my go-to in Alpharetta.
I love it, man. Sounds like some great options there. John, great stuff talking to you today. A couple of takeaways for me. One, your focus on being the executor, having that operations eye, solving problems, being rigid, as your wife says, getting into the weeds there and understanding how to solve these problems. That's kind of your superpower. And you've been able to align yourself with those visionaries to bring success to the table. You've had multiple exits in business and really understanding that for our listeners, that's a great way to grow and scale. If you have a certain skill set, go find someone who truly has that complementary skill set, whether it's the vision to identify opportunities or the ability to execute on your vision. I think that's just really, really great intel. We also talked a lot about culture, both from a resident standpoint, but also with your company, making sure you get the right people in place, people who have the experience, but also the mindset, the attitude, that buy into what you're trying to create. And that's going to really help you succeed. But you got to walk the walk yourself, right? If you are setting examples and saying, hey, being on time is a part of our culture, you got to be on time. So I love just hearing you talk about culture and just kind of the way you look to implement culture, set that culture, and rolling up your sleeves to be a part of the process of solving those issues. Whether it was, you mentioned your experience where you had to roll up the sleeves and kind of help get those deals back on track. But I just think it goes to show how you lead from the front and from the back when it comes to building culture.
And just to put a quick bow on that, I mean, it's funny, but nothing's beneath me or Mark, right? So we actually were touring one of our assets, and we actually ended up replacing this property manager, not specifically because of this, but it was like the last, straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak. But we were walking around behind the buildings and finding cigarette butts and loose trash. And, I'm thinking to myself, okay, so these people just walk by this for like 3 weeks. So I got a big, 5-gallon or 25-gallon, I should say, trash bag. And I half filled that thing personally and just brought it into leasing center and said, if I can do this, what stopped you? What stopped you? So it's being willing to do those things. It just goes all the way down to picking up trash at the property, right? Like, I'm not going to sit there and go, well, let's go find somebody to do that, right? So it's be willing to do whatever it takes to succeed. I actually had a business coach who told me that ambition in its purest form is the willingness to do whatever it takes to succeed. And I think that's, something that, I have, thankfully.
I love it. John, for those folks who want to learn more about you and the company, they can go to fariscapitalpartners.com. I want to thank you again for coming on the show today and being a great guest. We look forward to staying in touch with you, and I hope you have a great day.
Awesome, John. Thanks so much for your time. It was fun.